Welcome to the Cowardice channel. Today, we explain Prophets, Judges, chapter 19 in a clear and simple way, step by step. And let me tell you right up front, this is one of the most intense and, frankly, shocking chapters we are ever going to cover. Okay, so here is our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll start by setting the context, then follow the journey itself, witness the absolute tragedy at Gibeah, and look at the horrific aftermath. Finally, we'll clarify a few key details and pull out some truly crucial life lessons. So, let's dive right into our first part, the context of a deeply fractured Israel. Verse 1 opens with a really vital detail. It reminds us that in those days, Israel had no king. Now, this isn't just some random historical timestamp, right? It's literally the lens we have to look through for this entire story. Without a central leader enforcing the laws of the Torah, laws that are meant to demand justice and protect the vulnerable, society just starts to completely unravel. It's a time of moral chaos where people are just doing whatever seems right in their own eyes. And against this really grim backdrop, we meet our main characters. We have a Levite living way out in the remote hill country of Ephraim, and he takes a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah. Now, a Levite is supposed to be a member of the priestly tribe. This is a guy dedicated to serving God and upholding the moral fabric of the nation. But his actions kind of contradicts that calling right from the start. He takes a concubine. In the ancient world, a concubine was essentially a secondary wife. Yes, she had a recognized legal status and belonged to his household, but she definitely didn't have the full rights, the financial security, or the social protections of a primary wife. Moving into verses 2 and 3, we find out things have gone wrong. She was unfaithful to him. The text says she played the harlot, and she leaves him. She heads back to the safety of her father's house in Bethlehem. So 4 full months pass by. Finally, the Levite decides it's time to act. He gets up, takes his servant and a couple of donkeys, and goes after her. And the text gives us his exact motive. He wants to speak kindly unto her to bring her back. Well, he arrives, she brings him inside, and her father is just thrilled to see him. It really looks like a genuine moment of reconciliation. But then, verses 4 through 9 show us this really subtle, yet incredibly dangerous dynamic. The father-in-law hits them with this overwhelming hospitality. For 3 solid days, he keeps persuading the Levite to just stay, eat, drink, and relax. Day 4 rolls around, the Levite tries to hit the road, but the father-in-law insists he refresh himself first, and boom, the whole day slips away. Then, on the morning of the 5th day, it's the exact same story. Refresh yourself, just wait till the afternoon. On the surface, this aggressive hospitality seems super kind, right? But it completely wrecks the Levite's travel plans. By the time they finally manage to pack up and get out the door, it's late afternoon, almost evening. And that brings us to the next phase of our explainer, the ill-fated journey to Gibeah. Because of all those delays we just talked about, our group is now out on the road as the sun is starting to set. And let me tell you, traveling at night in the ancient world, extremely dangerous. You are wide open to bandits, wild animals, the elements. As they get near the non-Israelite city of Gibeah, which we know today as Jerusalem, the daylight is pretty much gone. The servant looks at the city and says the logical thing, hey, let's stop here and lodge. But Gibeah at this time is controlled by the Jebusites. It's a non-Israelite city. So the Levite flat out rejects the idea. He says, we will not turn aside into a city of foreigners. Instead, he forces them to push further up the road to Gibeah, which is an Israelite town belonging to the tribe of Benjamin. His logic makes sense in theory, right? He assumes he's going to be way safer among his own brethren, the children of Israel, than he would be among foreigners. But keep that assumption in mind, because it is the tragic pivot of this entire narrative. So verses 15 through 18 describe them arriving in Gibeah right at sunset. They go straight into the town and just sit down in the open square. Now, in the culture of the ancient Near East, sitting in the town square wasn't just taking a break. It was a visible, understood request for hospitality. The locals had a strict social obligation to take travelers in, and the Levite points out later that he is fully stocked. He's got his own bread, wine, even straw for the donkeys. He's not asking for charity or handouts. He literally just needs a safe roof over his family's head. But then the text drops this chilling line, there is no man that taketh me into his house. The entire town of Benjamin just ignores them. Nobody steps up. This is our first massive, glaring red flag about the moral state of Gibeah. Finally, in verses 19 through 21, an old man comes along. He's returning from a long day of work in the fields. And notice the super specific detail the text gives us here. This guy is just a sojourner in Gibeah. He's originally from the hill country of Ephraim, exactly like the Levite. He recognizes a fellow countryman, and he immediately offers up his home. but pay close attention to his exact phrasing. He says, "Only don't spend the night in the square." Think about that. He isn't just politely offering a spare bed. That is a desperate warning. This old man lives there. He knows exactly what the men of Gibeah are capable of when the sun goes down. Which leads us into the darkest part of this explainer, the actual tragedy at Gibeah. Okay, we are entering a deeply disturbing portion of the text here, but we absolutely must look at what they shot. The plain, literal meaning is telling us about the depths to which this society has sunk. Verses 22 through 24 describe that while the travelers are resting and washing their feet, the men of the city suddenly surround the house. The text literally calls them base fellows, just wicked men. They start pounding on the door, and what they demand is horrifying. They tell the old man to bring out the male guest so they can have relations with him. This is a direct, terrifying parallel to the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. The old man actually steps outside and pleads with them. He begs them not to commit this wickedness, desperately reminding them that this man is a guest under his roof and his protection. What happens next is an unthinkable compromise. It really shows how absolute the breakdown of morality is in this town. To protect his male guest, the old man offers his own virgin daughter and the Levite's concubine to this violent mob. It's just shocking, but the mob refuses to listen. And then we read a verse that exposes the absolute, utter cowardice of the Levite. To save his own skin, the Levite takes his concubine and literally forces her out the door, abandoning her into the hands of the mob. The text is brief, but it is brutal. They rape and abuse her all night long, and they only let her go when dawn finally breaks. Think about the tragedy here. The very man who traveled to speak kindly to her has now literally sacrificed her to a violent mob just to save himself. In verses 26 through 28, as the sun starts coming up, the concubine somehow drags herself back to the house. She collapses right at the doorway, her hands resting on the threshold. When the Levite gets up, the text explicitly says he opened the doors to continue on his way. Let that sink in for a second. He was simply going to leave. He sees her lying there and casually says, "Get up, let's go." It is unbelievably callous. But there is no answer. She is dead. And without a single word of mourning recorded in the text, he just lifts her lifeless body onto his donkey and heads back home to Ephraim. And that brings us to the horrific aftermath of that night. The private horror of what happened in Gibeah is about to be broadcast to every single corner of the nation of Israel. Verse 29 reveals what the Levite does when he finally gets home. He doesn't wash her or prepare her for a traditional burial. Instead, he takes a knife and he systematically dismembers his concubine into 12 pieces. He then dispatches messengers to carry these pieces throughout all the territories of Israel to demand justice. It's an incredibly grotesque, extreme method of communication, right? But he is forcing every single tribe to visually confront the undeniable physical evidence of the atrocity committed by the tribe of Benjamin. The chapter concludes with verse 30, and it captures the sheer, absolute horror of everyone who sees this. The shockwave that goes through the nation is instantaneous. Everyone who encounters these messengers is just appalled. They universally agree that such an evil act had not been witnessed since the day the Israelites came out of the slavery of Egypt. The chapter ends leaving us with this resounding, urgent cry to the leaders, "Think about it, consider it, tell us what to do." The Levites' shocking summons works. It successfully unites a completely fractured nation in shared outrage, setting the stage for a massive civil war. Okay, let's take a quick breath here and clarify a few specific details from the text. It's really crucial we map out exactly how this unfolded geographically so we can fully grasp the Peshat. The tragic irony of this entire text is that the Levite bypassed Gibeah because he was terrified of foreigners, only to suffer unspeakable evil at the hands of his own fellow Israelites in Gibeah. If we trace their route, they start down in Bethlehem, a place of safety, warmth, and overflowing hospitality. They travel north, approaching Gibeah. The Levite explicitly says, "Nope, not stopping among non-Israelites," firmly believing that true safety is with his own people, the Benjamites, so they push into Gibeah. But the shocking twist of the narrative is that the Israelites of Gibeah act infinitely worse than any foreigner would have. They completely trample on the sacred laws of hospitality, protection, and basic human decency. The danger wasn't some outside other. The real danger was the moral rot, festering right inside their own borders. Now, let's zoom out a bit and look at the key, simple ideas driving this narrative. What are the core themes the author of Judges is trying to get across here? Well, The fact that the text keeps repeating Israel had no king is its clear explanation for this total collapse of basic morality. When there's a vacuum of leadership, people horrifyingly prioritize self-preservation over protecting the vulnerable. Let's connect this back to the wider Torah. In books like Leviticus and Deuteronomy, the Israelites are strictly commanded to judge fairly, to protect the stranger, and to never stand idly by the blood of their neighbor. Gibeah represents the complete and total abandonment of all those laws. Without leadership to enforce justice, the strong just prey on the weak. The men of Gibeah act like a pack of wild wolves. And even the Levite, a man of God, completely discards his duty to protect his concubine, using her as a human shield just to buy his own survival. So, what are the practical life lessons we can take away from this? Even from a text this grim, we absolutely must pull out practical lessons on how to improve ourselves and our communities today. Because this isn't just dry history, it's a mirror held right up to human nature. First, we clearly see the absolute necessity of the rule of law. Without a commitment to justice, society descends into violence almost immediately. Second, look at the contrast between the father-in-law's hospitality and the old man's. The father-in-law offered endless food and drink, sure, but his delays put them in mortal danger. The old man? He offered a secure haven from the dangerous streets. True hospitality isn't just about putting out a nice spread, it's about providing genuine security and care for people. And finally, the darkest lesson comes from the Levite himself. When we prioritize our own comfort or our own survival over the safety of those entrusted to our care, we lose our humanity. A healthy, righteous community is judged by how fiercely it protects those who cannot protect themselves. Let's do a short recap of everything we just covered. To summarize our step-by-step walkthrough, we traced a fatal journey that exposes the absolute lowest point of civil society, showing exactly how a fractured nation lacking unified moral leadership can spiral completely into darkness. Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.